Welcome aboard, Giants fans, to episode 53 of Talk is Chief, our New York Giants podcast right here on NJ.com. Thanks so much for making last week one of the most listened to podcasts for the last couple weeks since the draft. You guys have been great and listening and obviously being part of this show here. So we're going to keep bringing them towards you as we get closer and closer to the summer OTAs next week. We'll get into some thoughts on that. But right now, we're going to start with the Giants and the way they are right now and how can they still maybe improve a little bit before they start putting the pads on when the summer comes along. Jordan, how are you, bud?
We're rolling, Joe. We're rolling along here. Podcast gaining steam. Everyone's listening in. Thanks to everybody who's been tuning in. Help make us one of the fastest growing at least team-specific podcasts out there, it seems. So we appreciate everyone's support. And we're going to lay out our plans here for potential improvement before the season. Exciting.
It is, and yeah, every fan always wants to see even more improvement. And we had the offseason, all the money the Giants spent in free agency, and then of course the NFL draft. But
yeah, they want every veteran free agent they want on the roster. They want the Giants to go sign.
They want them all. Bring them in, and let's have a whole big party at training camp with all this talent here. James, for you, as we move towards this time of the year with OTAs coming up soon, this is kind of the time where you start hearing about those veteran free agents, right? Like there's still some players out there that
yes.
We were just looking at the list before the show that, there's probably a reason they're out there for whatever reason, age or injury or whatever, or money. But there's some names out there that you'd say, like you would think that guy would be on a roster.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just running off the list real quick, not going to include like the quarterbacks like Fitzpatrick, but Dwight Freeney's out there, Dante Whitner, Leon Hall, Brandon Boykin, Anquan Bolden. So there are some quality names that have established themselves in the league that are still out there. Will Beattie's out there.
That's right. Beattie is. Yeah, Beattie. And I thought he'd be on a team by now. But you're right. There's some veteran players that, have had success in this league. Like you mentioned, Freeney. I mean, a lot of success in this league in the past. And now we sit here on the cusp of OTAs for the Giants. Other teams around the league having theirs. And, mini camp will be here. Pretty quickly. Things are going to start moving now into the summer. So we're going to go through, and each of you have a plan here for the Giants, how you would still try to improve this team a little bit before we do get to training camp. So, Jordan, we'll start with you. Give your plan. We'll talk about it. James, you give your plan. We'll talk about it, and we'll kind of piece together what the Giants maybe still can do here as we're in the spring. So, Jordan, what do you think? I mean, the Giants have, I think, improved a lot since last year, but there's always more improvement they can do.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the roster and I see, the right side of the offensive line. It's still something that they'd like to address, something that I'm the GM here that I'd like to address. And I'm also looking at the secondary and saying they need more cornerbacks. I know they drafted one in the first round. I know they signed a bunch of undrafted free agents at the position. But to me, I still need more at cornerback. I mean, who's going to start? Who do I feel comfortable starting in the slot? That's a position, slot cornerback, 65% of the time they're on the field. That's basically a starting position. Who is going to start and hold down that spot? Eli Apple has never played there. I'm not moving Janoris Jenkins after I signed him to all this money. I'm not moving him inside to a position he hasn't really played. DRC, I'm not moving him there. He was the Eagles tried that back with the Dream Team in 11, I believe, 11 or 12, and it was a disaster for him. He had his worst year of his career, so I'm not moving DRC there. I want a proven slot cornerback, the best option out there. My first move is to add Leon Hall. Former Bengal guy, played really well last year. He had some back surgery in the offseason, but he's supposed to be fine. It adds depth to the position. I want Leon Hall. That's a veteran that I think this team needs. And even with Leon Hall, though, I'm not going and trading DRC now. I know that we mentioned this a couple weeks actually, it was in the last podcast. ESPN's Dan Graziano talked about it. And it's not something that's completely out of the blue. There's been word leaking out that the Giants may not be that high on him. We'll get to that in a little bit of probably why, but but I still want him on my roster. He's not a huge salary number. The money is not something they need. I want DRC on my roster this year. I think he's a benefit to this team. Look, if you have Leon Hall on the roster, then if DRC has to come off the field, which he has been a lot in the last 2 years, or his 2 years with the Giants, then look, that's what you have Eli Apple there for. Look, you drafted Eli Apple. I'm not fully intent, 100% saying, okay, this guy has to start, this guy has to play. He's on the roster, do what's best for the team right now. And if he's not one of the best cornerbacks on the roster, I don't want to shove him out there and pigeonhole him into the starting lineup. So on the offensive side, I say, okay, I think Anquan Boldin still, to me, that's a good signing for this team, a good influence on Odell Beckham. He's a good veteran presence. He's tough. He's a possession kind of guy. So I'm a big fan of that, of adding another veteran. Fine, sure. It depends how much money he wants guaranteed. I'm not going to give him a ton of guaranteed money because I want to have flexibility. Sort of like James Jones last year. James Jones was a late signing. They brought him in. They said they looked around. They said, okay, where does he fit? How are we going to be able to use this guy now? If Victor Cruz is healthy and you don't want Anquan Boldin, then you let go of him. But that's why the guaranteed money comes into play there. But I would like to add him. I think there's some benefits of having him around those guys, around Cruz, around Shepard, around Odell Beckham. I think he brings something different to the table. Physical. Look, he doesn't have speed. He's not going to get downfield. But I like that mix with those guys. So now without the offensive line, I'm not going to trade DRC. So my plan here is you let it pan out. You go in there, you take a look at Bobby Hart, see if he could fit into either the right guard or right tackle spot. You have Marshall Newhouse, John Jerry. You see what you got. And towards the end of training camp, sometime this summer, I'm looking to add an offensive lineman, but not with DRC and probably not the same level of player because DRC is a higher level player than what I'm going to put out there right now. But I'm going to say, okay, you have Will Tye, who some people might like. He had a promising, first year, rookie year. People might see some value in him. He's cheap. You could see a guy. I mean, I don't see a guy who's eventually going to turn into a Pro Bowl type player. So I see a decent player, him and Larry Donnell, guys that can have 60 catches, 800 yards, 6 touchdowns, that sort of range. So I try and swing one of those two guys for a borderline starting offensive lineman, a guy that maybe you could throw in there, a guy that might be, if you don't like what you're seeing from Bobby Hart or John Jerry or Marshall Newhouse, a guy that would be an upgrade. Obviously, you're not going to get a Pro Bowler. You're not going to get a Pro Bowler in any shape or form right now. So I think you can get a decent starting offensive lineman, a guy who might be getting pushed out by a younger guy somewhere else for, let's say, a Will Tye. And I don't think it's a big downgrade if I'm taking Larry Donnell over Will Tye. And I think Will Tye probably has more value. So that's my plan. I'm not adding anything at safety. There's nothing out there that entices me enough to say, okay, all these young options for the Giants that they have there, the 3 guys that they've drafted in the last couple of years, the Darian Thompson, even Justin Curry, like one of those guys I think has to be able to be a decent player in the NFL, and it's better than getting an old Antro Roll or who else did we say was out there, or Dante Whitner, who doesn't really fit next to Landon Collins, in my opinion. So that's my plan of how to get the Giants to be a better team before the season starts.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, and I like some of what you did, and we'll get into it. But I do want to just touch on, before we kind of unpack the plan and the players you think the Giants could or maybe should bring in if you were GM. Just want to go back to a second. You mentioned there about DRC. This is the second week now that we've at least touched on the idea that maybe the Giants would move on from him at some point. I think after this coming season with his contract, that is probably logical. But for this year, I think a lot of Giants fans are saying, well, why in any way, shape, or form would the Giants even consider getting rid of DRC? Now, it wasn't part of your plan, but that idea has kind of been out there, and Giants fans are talking about it. Can you think of why? I mean, what are you hearing? What do you think? Because, I mean, he's a good player, not a great player, but I just think if the Giants didn't have him for this year, they'd probably be pretty thin at corner. So what's the thinking there, Jordan?
Yeah, I mean, I know some fans are pretty high on DRC, and it's really caused, especially you look at social media, some people to get very excited is the way I'm going to say it.
Sounds like social media summed up pretty well there. People get a little too excited.
So, yeah, I've heard it on multiple occasions that the Giants aren't as high on him as maybe some of these DRC fans out there. And this is as a player, I believe. So I don't think this has much to do with, personality or some sort of problem. I don't think he's never caused a problem in the locker room. I've never heard anything like that. I've never heard of him make a fuss. I've never heard of him talk about money, any of that sort of stuff. But, putting two and two together, my guesstimate here is that it has to do with the fact that the Giants aren't crazy about him as a player because of how the last 2 years have unfolded. Look, what has been one of the Giants' top priority this offseason? Health, right? They went and signed Olivier Vernon, who has never missed a game in his career. Janoris Jenkins, who I think missed 4 games as a rookie, so he's basically missed 4 games in either his rookie or second year, 4 games in 4 years. So just guys that are healthier, more reliable. DRC, he comes off the field a lot. He hasn't been able to stay on the field for full games, and that's a problem because when you're a defensive coach and you're making a game plan, okay, we're going to put DRC on, I'm making it up, Dez Bryant this game, okay? And the whole game plan, that's part of the game plan. You have DRC on Dez Bryant, and he has to come off the field for 10 plays, and the J-Ron Hosleys of the world, whoever your backup cornerbacks are, have to come in those 10 plays, which you never know when they're going to happen. They happen in an instant, just like that. And then you have to put in J-Ron Hosley and say, okay, he's guarding Dez Bryant for these 10 plays, that are out of nowhere and that are sort of random. And him pulling himself off the field, in the middle of a drive, it really puts the team at a disadvantage. Go ahead.
Forget about 10 plays. There were situations last year where he was off the field for 1 play, and Hosley came in and got burned immediately for a big pass.
Yeah, so I think that's the impetus of why we're hearing this and why. I've heard it when Janoris Jenkins was signed. It was something that somebody mentioned to me. It was mentioned to me again recently as the Giants were poking around corners. Was that DRC isn't quite as high on their list of players that they're in love with, that they're a big part of their future plans. So I think that's sort of where this is coming from.
Yeah, and I guess it makes sense then when you think about what the Giants did this offseason. All the money they gave to Janoris Jenkins. They needed to add a corner anyway, but then drafting Eli Apple in the first round, it feels like they have set themselves up for eventually replacing DRC as a starter. That probably doesn't happen now, but they spent a lot of offseason draft capital and free agent money to bring in starting corners in their mind.
Their starting corners next year in their mind are Eli Apple and Janoris Jenkins. It's hard for anyone to look at it any other way. DRC has no more guaranteed money. He's 31 years old. It's all pointing in that direction. Disagree, James?
Go ahead,
James. Agree?
No, I totally agree, which is, if I might as well jump right into my plan, I'm also signing Leon Hall because I'm trading DRC. I just think he's not in your future plans.
All right.
He's not in your future plans. You need help in other positions more than you need at cornerback. So if you add Leon Hall, you go you have Hall and Jenkins, you have Apple, you have Trevin Wade, who I think they like as a 4th cornerback. You have some young guys that you're bringing in to camp. There's going to be some guys that shake loose during camp on the waiver wire. And then, there's no way to get a major upgrade at right tackle or even add a pass rusher on the free agent market really right now. There are some guys, but you talk about, okay, a guy like Luis Vasquez. There's going to be 20 teams competing for him when you get a training camp. So I would move DRC. Now, I know last week we had said DRC for Eugene Monroe for the Ravens. I don't necessarily think that should be a straight-up trade. I would think that the Giants might be able to get a little bit of compensation from out of the Ravens elsewhere, but I just think it's a move that makes sense. They have their opinions of DRC. The future is pretty clear that he's not going to be a part moving forward, and sometimes you got to give something up to get something. So I think that when you look at the grand scheme of the team, their needs at other positions are bigger than what they would have at cornerback if they get rid of DRC.
You can see what you're talking about there. You're basically weighing cornerback depth versus offensive line starter, basically, and you're weighing that. You're going to have to give away something at one of those spots, and you'd rather give away cornerback depth than offensive line starter, which I could fully understand.
Yeah, I just think that I understand that fans get all upset, and I'm sure they'll be coming at me now on Twitter, but it just seems to me that if you're not planning on having DRC there next year, and you just drafted a guy number 10, and this would be conditional on we're signing a veteran cornerback who we trust, and we've got a guy in Wade that we think can be a fourth cornerback, and we've got a bunch of young guys that we like. They're going to be in camp. It just seems to me that it's a lot easier to trade DRC and get yourself an answer on the offensive line than to hold on to DRC and try to find something shaking loose in the summer.
It's all contingent on you thinking Eli Apple can play and start too his rookie year. I mean, if they don't feel that, then this is going to be a move that they can't make.
Yes, that too. I mean, they'd have to feel comfortable with Apple, but who knows? Maybe they get to camp and Apple looks okay on the outside, and they like call him a slot and they go from that. But I just think you at least have to investigate trading DRC. I think if you don't investigate trading him, then you're just kind of doing yourself a disservice. You need to see what's out there and what you could get for him.
What about the other side of this? Obviously, if you're going to do that, James, you're going to want something back, like you said. I mean, you never trade a starting player just for the hell of it, unless he's a locker room problem, which is not the case here. So,
or the Eagles. If you're the Eagles, you just
right. If you're Chip Kelly, you just
go.
Yeah, you just do whatever you feel, wake up feeling like doing. But what do you think his value is around the NFL? I mean, the Giants obviously know him so well now and up close, and there's those coming in and out of games and the kind of the injury issue in games sometimes. But do you think other teams would look at him like, wow, that's a pretty good talent that, if he was a free agent, we'd have to pay and maybe we could get him for cheaper in a trade? I mean, what do you think other teams think of DRC? Like if we weren't around the Giants, what would you think of DRC if you just were kind of trying to watch him from afar, if you could try to put yourself in that position?
I don't know, Jordan, if you're a team that's contending or close to it, would you give a 4th or 5th round pick for him?
For DRC?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's a reasonable price. He could still play, but I mean, that doesn't do the Giants any good.
No, I'm just saying, so if you call Baltimore and say, all right, we'll give you DRC and we want Eugene Monroe and a 5th round pick, I think that's an equitable trade.
It probably is. I think we talked about this last week. Ozzie Newsome has not been shy about trading for veterans in the summer. Has done it a lot over the years. So, I mean, that one, just team-wise, that would make some sense. It's interesting as we make this plan to improve the Giants. There's also that thought of maybe subtracting a little bit from what they have. All right.
Yeah, I don't know if the Ravens would give up draft picks though. They're big into this. They're the ones. They're the ones who accumulate all those compensatory picks. I think the bigger question is, would you do? Okay, you want your offensive line. Would you do it straight up?
If Eli Apple can play and they're convinced that he can play, I would. Yeah, I would do that trade. I think Monroe still can play. He's only 29. That would make me feel a lot better at right tackle. But if they're still unsure of Apple, I don't think they could do that.
Now, there's other options that'll come up around the league that might fall into this category. So we're just throwing out a name that we're looking at. It makes logical sense because they just drafted a guy. He's sort of out of favor there. There's also, other things that have come up with him. He's promoting the legalization of medical marijuana.
Yes,
I don't know.
yes.
So I don't know. Honestly, I don't know anything about that kind of stuff, and that would be something you got to look into. But This is just a hypothetical here, and when we're talking about trading for an offensive lineman, this is the kind of guy we're talking about. A guy who's out of favor, has been a starter, can start, can come in here and possibly start. But you're not going to get, an all-pro or a pro bowler. That's just nobody's giving away. That's not on the market.
Yeah, no, and I think another thing that we kind of touched on when we did the projected depth charts is that, okay, so you have an issue at right tackle, but what happens if Eric Flowers gets hurt? You don't have anybody Justin Pugh is your backup left tackle. You don't want to move him off a guard. So if something happens in a disaster scenario, if a guy like Monroe is your starting right tackle, I think you'd feel more comfortable putting him on the left side than putting Marshall Newhouse on the left side.
Oh, by far, yeah. He's done it before. Yeah,
I don't even think that's an option. That is not an option that this team would ever get to the point of using. I don't. That scenario doesn't exist where Marshall Newhouse is the left tackle.
No, I don't think it does. But I was just saying. So let's say they take the line as it is, and Flowers gets hurt. Well, what are you going to do?
You're in trouble. You're in desperation mode at that point if that would happen there. So. As I listen to both of your plans and the possibility of a trade or bringing this guy or that guy in, of all these players that are potentially available, right? Like the available guys, I mean, in free agency, not Monroe because he's on a team right now. We're just kind of having fun with a speculation and just an idea of a trade. But of the guys that are free agents, which one is kind of the most intriguing for you? Both. We'll take it from two perspectives. We'll go to Jordan and James. One from the Giants' perspective, and then two just from a football perspective because he's going to land somewhere, and you think there's something still left in the tank. So. Which guys are the most intriguing to you still out there, Jordan?
Bolden is the guy that does intrigue me a little bit. I mean, Bolden and Leon Hall, those are the two guys I said they wanted them to sign. Like, they intrigue me because they're proven. I mean, they're guys that played decent last year. And I want to see if you didn't play decent last year, Anthony Davis didn't play last year. Brandon Boykin didn't have a good year last year. Obviously, everyone around the league seems pretty down on Brandon Boykin. Was he going on his fourth team in 2 years?
And he's still young. It's amazing. That guy just bounces around everywhere.
Yeah. So again, the public perception and the league's perception on that guy, I do not believe is the same. So I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in Antrel Roll. You're talking about a guy at the end of his career. So that's why Bolden and Hall to me are the two guys that intrigue me because they both played pretty well last year. I know that that they have the best chance of having something left in the tank, in my opinion.
I agree, especially when it comes to Bolden. I mean, I've been thinking about that since the beginning of the offseason, the first wave of free agency.
Yeah, you've been a proponent, Joe.
Yeah, I've always been a fan of him, and I think he just could give the Giants something that they don't have. I mean, they have these guys that are younger and quick and fast and have some deep speed, which is, of course, what you want. But there's something about what Bolden still brings. It's kind of that old man wide receiver that I think would – it would help. James, for you, who are the free agents that you're intrigued by, just that they're still out there? Which ones for you across the league, and then for the Giants' perspective?
I definitely think Bolden's intriguing. I think Hall's intriguing. The guy for me who really strikes the Giants, I think should be an option for them, is the guy that they didn't take last year, and then he went Dwight Freeney. I really think the Giants should look into him because they've done all these improvements to the defense. But their pass rushing situation is they have Vernon and JPP on the ends, and that's about it. You have Owa, who's basically a rookie.
Yep.
Kerry Wynn, who was a good find for the Giants. He's good against the run. He's not a pass rusher.
Yeah.
Okay. You think Jay Bromley can maybe pass rush a little bit as an interior tackle, but still, he's a guy who's got to prove it. So I think the Giants, Brad Bars is a situational pass rushing lineman, but that's about it. They don't really have, and the pass rush was the major issue last year, and they've only really got two established guys who are pass rushers right now. So I think a guy like Dwight Freeney, even if he plays 20 snaps a game, he gives you something that you might not necessarily have. How's he going to
fit in 20 snaps, though? This is where I'm a little confused. Where are you throwing him in 20 snaps? Taking JPP off the field for 20 snaps, or Vernon, or moving one of them inside?
I would say you probably move JPP inside. You move him around. You just pick your choice. Because, forget about if one of those guys gets injured. Take that aside for a second. Right. It's just I think they have a need. They can add pass rushers. They surprisingly, I know they were going to get Leonard Floyd, but once they got outfoxed on Leonard Floyd, they didn't take anybody. Giants fans are going to say, "Oh, we don't want this guy," but the Browns have no interest. Barkevious Mingo is you could probably get him for a bag of balls from the Browns right now. So maybe looking at trading for a guy like him and to see if you can catch lightning in a bottle with a guy. I just think that they could use more pass rushing options. And Freeney is a guy who produced last year. He's a veteran with a limited snap count, maybe moving guys like JPP around. He's a guy who I think would be an intriguing option for the Giants.
I'm with you, James. And I was just looking at his numbers as you were talking there, and I was shocked. I didn't realize how productive he was last year in limited time. He played 11 games with the Cardinals last year, and he had 8 sacks and 3 forced fumbles. I mean, he still got after the quarterback, at least in terms of that kind of production. I wasn't watching snap by snap, but if you have
which is why I'm not so much against the going after him. But if you're him, wouldn't you rather go to someone like the Cowboys, who aren't set out there, who have these guys suspended, or a team where they're not so
Definitely, Jordan.
committed to their two pass rushers on the outside?
I don't know. I think you're right. I mean, he might find a better option. Let me ask you guys this: when it comes to Freeney, but then just the pass rush in general, because I've been wondering this since the draft came and went, and they didn't land Floyd. What do you think the Giants' defensive line will look like? Just right now, and obviously will change when you get out there for OTAs and then training camp. But what do you think it could look like on 3rd and long? Like, Jonathan Hankins had a bunch of sacks, recently, but he's not a pass rusher, and obviously that's not Damon Snacks Harrison at all. We mentioned Owa, but in the past the Giants have, when they had all that depth at defensive line, they had those ends that can move inside, like you were just talking about there, James. They used to do that NASCAR thing where it was like 4 defensive ends across. Like 3rd and 9, week 1 against the Cowboys, obvious pass rush situation. They have 4 down linemen. What do you think it would look like right now? James and then Jordan.
This is a good question.
It's a really good question. I guess I'm going to say JPP and Vernon will definitely be there. My assumption is Vernon's outside. We'll put JPP inside. I guess they would hope to have Owa out
inside?
there.
You think he can go inside with the hand? I don't know.
That's
I really
a really good question.
idea.
It's a great
That's why
question.
I'm asking you. I thought about it, but I really have no idea.
I have no idea. I mean, I guess maybe Bromley. See, therein lies the point. I just, it's tough. I mean, do they walk up Kennard somehow? I don't know.
The question is, who's going to be on the inside? Are you going to put Jonathan Hankins in there? Is he going to be your pass rushing tackle? And those kind of guys need they can't play 60 snaps. The big guys like that. So what interests me is, will we see Owa on the inside? I think that actually has a chance of happening.
I'm looking at their depth chart right now, and it's like, all right, Stanley Mapanga. I mean, who knows what he obviously has been in the league for a while. They got a lot of young guys, undrafted guys, but you can't count on them. I don't really know what their 3rd down package looks like. Is
Kennard good enough where you have to get him on the field on 3rd down? Is he that good a pass rusher?
That's a very good question. He's got to stay healthy first, but
Right.
So it's.
He's a good pass rusher for a linebacker, though. But is he a good pass rusher as a defensive end? I mean, that's the question. Is he better than a Dwight Freeney on 3rd down?
I'm going to lean toward no for now, but
yeah, I'm with you.
I just think the pass rush is still an issue. I think that the interior tackles, I think they should feel pretty good. You got Snacks, you got Jonathan Hankins. You hope Jay Bromley steps up, and then you've got a group of guys like Montour Hughes, Lewis Nix. One of those guys you got to hope can be the 4th tackle. But
yeah, I don't think those are pass rushing guys.
They're not pass rushing guys.
Those are more run guys. That's the problem. There's a lot of run guys.
A lot of run stuffers, and the pass rush, it's not there. I mean, Jordan mentioned Brad Bars. I could definitely see him playing some sort of role because they need guys coming off the edge, and they don't have a lot of them that are proven at this point.
Yeah, Bars is a guy with a really good motor. Doesn't stop, but you could see it when he practices. Maybe that is something. I wouldn't be surprised to see him, play some pass rushing linebacker type spots and blitzing also. So I think the real question, though, and this is Joe, why it's such a good question, is who's going to be the Justin Tuck guy that goes on the interior to pass rush, the defensive end that goes into the interior. When you are in a straight, okay, let's go get the quarterback deal. Robert Ayers did it very well last year and the year before, 2 years in a row. Now he's gone. So who does it now? I don't think you paid Vernon to do that.
I don't think you did either. Yeah, and it's funny. Just I threw out the question. I kind of thought about it. I was thinking of that situation that probably will arise multiple times in week 1. And yeah, of all the things the Giants did this offseason and all the ways they tried to improve and how much they spent to improve, the biggest thing we talked about when this offseason began was the pass rush. And while Vernon being there on a 85, 90% of the snaps, whatever, he'll play 100, whatever, who knows how long he'll be out there. As long as he's out there, he'll help them, he improved them, but they still have that issue. And the Freeney idea, James, or anybody they could find for a pass rusher, I wonder, how they do this coming into the season, because it's still an issue to me, and that probably shouldn't be, right, James? I mean, they tried to solve this.
I think when they signed Vernon, we just all sat here and assumed that they were going to get a guy like Floyd in the first round. They were going to pick up another pass rusher later on, and they have plenty of pass rushers. But they kind of surprised us, and they went out and they drafted a safety and a tight end and another running back, and now it's the pass rushers. I mean, look, for all we know, Owa could come out and have make a major impact after basically missing all of last year, and they could be fine. But until these guys prove themselves, they have, in my opinion, major uncertainties behind the two big names, and that could end up being a major issue come week one, even given all the improvements they've made elsewhere.
James, flip side.
Yes.
Just stating the scenario. Owa. Here's a guy who's had a lot of injuries in his past. What if he's injured? What is their depth if Owa is injured behind JPP and Vernon?
I don't know. That's why I think there's like these guys, these undrafted guys. I mean, one of them might make the team because they need someone.
Romeo Okwara led Notre Dame in sacks with 8 last year. Never know.
Maybe
Freeney's sounding better. You guys are selling me here.
I mean, if not Freeney, and we talked about trading DRC, not to go back to that, but all right, so if you can't find a sufficient right tackle or offensive line help, maybe you start calling around about pass rushers.
Well, especially what if you have an injury to one of you guys? What if JPP or Vernon actually have a 4-week injury or something? Then you really got to go. Then you say, okay, well, we'll definitely we have to give up our cornerback depth in order to improve our pass rush.
And I know the Giants are hoping this isn't the case, but what happens if they get out there and the JPP we saw last year is basically the JPP we see now? Maybe that's the ceiling.
And how many double-digit sack seasons does Vernon have on his resume coming in here? None, right? He's never
One. He does.
One. Okay.
He had tremendous. I think he had led the league in quarterback hits last year.
Right, he's a good player. I'm not saying
he's
he
a good
won't
player,
help.
but you're right.
He's not Von Miller. I think that's what we're the point.
Right, exactly.
Von Miller's not out there.
No.
Yeah, and so, I mean, that's going to be a story I'm sure we're going to follow as camp goes on. How are they going to rush the passer and who's going to contribute with it? All right, so you've given your plans, and we'll see what the Giants do over the next couple of weeks. The next pressing thing, and you'll be there starting right at the beginning of next week. We're doing this podcast on a Thursday. I believe you guys will be there Monday for the start of OTAs. So before we wrap up episode 53, give me one thing you guys are just kind of thinking about or looking for in OTAs. I mean, I know a lot of this could just be, it's not really practice. They're just out there and are getting together again. But it is the first time everyone will probably be there and together for the first time. Draft picks, rookies, and the veterans. Jordan and then James, what are you looking for next week?
You can see the plans of the team. I mean, for the first time, we're going to see the rookies on the field, where they sort of fit in. Now, granted, they haven't been in there too long, so they're probably still learning, so lower on the depth chart. But we'll see with some of these veterans, some of these free agents, okay, where do they stand at middle linebacker right now? How are they utilizing those guys? Is Keenan Robinson working with the first team yet? Or is that still Jasper Brinkley's spot? Who are they using in that first team nickel pass rush unit that we just talked about? Who's in the slot? Who's in that defensive tackle spot rushing the passer? These are things that are of interest. I mean, I want to see, are they going to use JPP inside at all? We have, is that an option? Is that something they're thinking about? Because this is the time to sort of play around with it if you are. If you're thinking about it, you go into mini camp and training camp and you try it early. You see if you think it's going to work, and then if it doesn't, then you can just scrap it and then go in a different direction. So this is the time when you go and do those kind of things. Let's see what they're thinking about at free safety. Where does Darius Thompson fit in the mix? These are the things that I'm interested in. Where is Sterling Shepard going to start out at? Is he going to be on the outside primarily? Are they going to put him in the slot? Are we going to see Victor Cruz is another thing I'm interested in seeing. So let's see how he looks first time in forever.
It does feel like forever since Victor Cruz has been out there running around and catching passes from Eli. James, what are you looking for when OTAs begin?
I definitely agree with Jordan. I think it'll be really what does Cruz do? I mean, it's only OTAs. We're only going to be there for one day on Monday, but is he out there at all? Is he still off to the side? Does he line up at all? Does he run at all? I'm working on something. I'm really intrigued to see if we get any signs of what the plan is with Will Johnson, the fullback they signed in the offseason. He's a very versatile guy, and
James loves those big guys.
Yeah, HVAC
James likes
guys.
old school football. You can hear it. Yeah.
And
long snappers too. Long snappers, right?
Yes, long snappers too. I'm intrigued to see how Ben McAdoo uses him. When we were there for the mini camp, I don't think they really had any of the new guys lining up at all in the team portions we saw. I just think it's going to be fascinating to see how they use him, because he's a guy who he could line up as a tight end. He can line up as a traditional fullback. The Steelers even used him as a short yardage tailback at times last year. So I'm intrigued to see how he lines up, because I think that's going to be telling, because when you see how they utilize him, that's also going to be telling of, okay, so what's the future roster status for a guy like Nikita Whitlock? How many tight ends might they carry? Is this a guy who they feel is going to be their blocking tight end? So I think Will Johnson's going to be kind of a key puzzle piece to how a lot of other positions on the roster filter out as we get closer to the season.
How about if we're going to see Nikita Whitlock on the other side of the ball?
That's true. We should
have Will Johnson.
Yeah.
He does have some pass rush moves. We know that.
Yeah. Pass rush moves.
You know what? We didn't mention him. He is.
He is there.
They have a big void in that spot. Maybe he's a guy that they really have plans for, and that defensive line is a pass rusher.
He had a white jersey.
He did.
Maybe he comes out with a blue jersey. Not that it matters. I mean, G.J. Kinney was listed as a quarterback for over a year, and he was.
But he had a blue jersey. He was playing.
He did have a blue jersey.
He never had the white jersey.
You know what? Because I know fans like to. I want to see Anthony Dobley. I'm intrigued to see this, because when they had the mini camp, he was just kind of there. The coaching staff, and he said that he's starting to get a hold of the playbook. I also think it would be, if we could see it, one Odell versus Apple matchup. I think that would be something interesting to see as well.
I don't think Giants fans want to see that. They'll be down on their first round pick, I think, if they see that.
So, but yeah, no, I mean, we'll be there for one day. It'll probably be a walkthrough. We'll see none of these things, but I do think it's kind of the start of things resembling what this team is going to look like in 2016. So I think it's an intriguing time.
Joe, before we move on, do you know that James was a high school long snapper? That's why I said that before.
I didn't know.
Highly skilled high school long snapper.
James, you should have continued down that path of that craft, because they always, when you get that job, you never give it up. Like you could have made it as an NFL long snapper, then we wouldn't be doing this podcast right now.
Yeah, it's really funny. Like my last week of high school football, before the last game of the year, my senior year, I'm standing out there like at practice, and I'm like warming up or something. And like the coach walks over and goes, "Yo, you could long snap Division III or Division II, I think." And I was like, thanks, coach. Thanks for informing me this, as I've now sent out all my applications, all the deadlines, and they're all these SEC and Big Ten schools. Thanks for letting me know that I should have been going to these smaller schools. But no, I was fairly accurate at it, but probably not anymore.
When they did the after practice competitions last year, the Coughlin tried to institute those, and one of them, remember the long snappers, they had to snap the ball.
Yes.
Off the
upright.
Goalpost, right? Was it the upright or was it the base?
It was the base. The base. Excuse me.
Yeah, and James insisted that we should do that competition with him and see how regularly he can nail that post. He thought it was going to be a snap that he would have been all over it. So
we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll do that during training camp.
We'll have that video competition. James long snapping versus Zach Diassi.
All right, I'm just going to call this now before we wrap it up, because we always talk about when we're putting stuff up on the site. If the Giants lose Diassi, I call it right now. I'm going to write the piece that the Giants should sign James to replace Zach Diassi as their long snapper. All right, I just want to make sure.
He'll be like the long snapping version of Odell's cousin.
That's right. That is right. I feel like I have to be the one to write it, because James, you can't write it, and Jordan, I can understand why you don't want to put James on the spot, but I'll do it. I'll write it, and I'll say the Giants should sign this guy right now.
I could say this. I would try to provide as many headlines as Odell's cousin has for all of our colleagues out there.
James is going to dye his hair, but he's also going to do it blue.
We're not rooting for any injury to anyone, but man, if this somehow could happen, this would be This
No, I think I'd go the neon green, like the NJ Advanced Media color.
Neon green, James Cratch hair, your next long snapper. Everyone, we appreciate you listening. This was a fun one. OTAs start on Monday. We'll be back next week to kind of recap whatever you guys see in a walkthrough and have some other fun content on next week's show for you. And just a word on how you listen and where you want to listen. We just recently joined the iHeartRadio network, so you can also listen that way as well as Stitcher and iTunes and SoundCloud. However you want to listen to the show, it is available to you. And we appreciate all the downloads on iTunes. Last week we moved. At one point we were pretty near the top of iTunes Sport Podcast, which some pretty big podcasts in there along with us. So we appreciate all that.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
This podcast has grown a lot over the past year or so, and it's because of you guys listening. So we appreciate it, and we'll be back next week. Jordan, thanks for doing this, man.
Anytime, Joe. Let me just add this before we go. Send my little message to Jerry. Jerry, Jerry Reese, I know you're listening. So I hope you were listening. I laid out a good plan, a real good plan. So did James. These are two very good options.
I feel like Jerry's always listening to this podcast. I mean, you would think that we're his favorite people, so he's listening. But yes, Jerry, we appreciate you downloading last week as well. And
actually, Joe, if we made a list of things Jerry Reese would rather do than listen to us speak, I think you'd be really, really surprised at some of the things that were on that list. Pretty much anything and everything would be on that list of things he'd rather do rather than listen to us talk.
Yeah, almost everything he could possibly think of he would rather do. James, thanks for doing this as always.
No problem, Joe. Thank you.
And thanks to all of you for listening to episode 53 of Talk is Cheap. We'll be back with you next week right here on NJ.com.